Europe in Dürer's time was very different from the Europe we know today.
Dürer was born in Nuremberg, which was a city in what's now Germany.
The German lands were part of a political entity called the Holy Roman Empire. And it was called that because it really saw itself as successor to the mighty Roman Empire. And it reached from Bohemia, Switzerland to the Netherlands.
There were many changes going on and some huge upheavals to society and to systems of belief. One of the most startling things that happened in Dürer's lifetime, and to which he certainly responded, was the rise of Martin Luther's challenge to the Roman Catholic Church, which began in 1517. Martin Luther was one of those people who felt that the church in those times had really got disconnected from the teachings of Jesus Christ. And that ended up dismantling the structures of the Orthodox Catholic Church. We know that Dürer was extremely interested in reading for himself what Luther wrote. And we actually have a list in Dürer's own handwriting of pamphlets by Luther written in German that Dürer must himself had bought in order to read. The impact of Luther's ideas was felt on a lot of artists and the art that they were producing in early 16th century Germany. And Dürer himself, I think, really felt this, and he wanted to get back in a very close way to what the New Testament was saying about the life of Christ, about the suffering of Christ. And there's one particular drawing in which Dürer shows a really unusual moment of the story, in which Christ's body is actually being laid out to be embalmed. And one of the people in the foreground of the drawing is carrying an absolutely enormous jar. And that seems to be a reference to the very precise information that's given in the New Testament about how large this jar of embalming ointment was. There was clearly tremendous and growing intellectual curiosity. Universities were flourishing, and Dürer was very plugged into the intellectuals in Nuremberg.
One of the most exciting intellectual movements at the time was Humanism, and that sounds quite dusty to us as a term, but it was very exciting at the time because it was all about rediscovering classical knowledge and geography and topography and zoology. And we can see his interests in humanist ideas, in particular when we look at how he renders places and plants and then animals.
For example, the famous hare, it's really a portrait, a very vivid portrait of this animal somewhat sitting on this piece of paper in Dürer's workshop with a glance on his fur, on his hair, with the reflection of a window, the window of Dürer's workshop in his eye, with a soft light over the body of this animal.
He also painted the piece of turf outside his house, painting birds' wings, taking an interest in the everyday and the minuscule details that make up our world and make our world such a fascinating place.
He does capture in those moments something which is fundamentally true every single time. And this is the case whether it's an animal, a plant, a human being. There's a kind of humility in front of the image.
The image of the world changed. In late 15th century, when Dürer was around in his mid-20s, America has been discovered.
Connections began to be made with parts of the world beyond Europe. We know in this period that there were many people of African origin living in Europe before the slave trade began.
There may now be things that look, quote unquote, lifelike, that look real, as drawings of people of colour. But these were the first ones. There is literally nothing like them. Something about the character and personality of this young woman is absolutely caught. And that's a remarkable facility, to be able to capture a human being without judgment, without preconditions. They're just two ordinary people who happen to be black and living in the 16th century.
Dürer's father originally came from Hungary, so he travelled westwards and settled in Nuremberg. And because Nuremberg was an open, outward-facing city, it was much easier to settle there and establish himself as a goldsmith. And in 1471, Dürer was born there.